Welcome, everyone. To begin, as we mentioned, just make sure that everyone keeps their microphones muted and also keep the cameras off at this time. And at the end of our guest presentation, we will have a few minutes for questions. So you could take notes if something comes to mind, and we'll get to as many as time allows at the end of the meeting. Tonight, we are both grateful and blessed to have with us Karen Willock. Karen has worked in the field of addiction for 35 years and has been a certified alcohol and drug counselor since 1985. She completed nursing school in the early 70s and transitioned to the addiction field in 1984. In 2016, she entered a year-long intern program and became certified as a practitioner of 20 concepts approach and trauma model theory to recovering from PTSD and addiction. She currently runs TAM Hero, Treehouse Recovery's national family program. Karen's passion for helping families comes from within her own life, with three sons, ages 50, 34, and 29, who all struggle with addiction. And having also suffered the tragic loss of her 4-year-old daughter years ago, she understands the fear and reality of losing a child. Those fears and trying to constantly fix and protect her sons cost her pieces of her life she cannot get back. At some point, Karen decided she had to find a way she could thrive instead of just surviving, regardless of what stage of addiction or recovery her sons were currently in. Today, that is what she practices daily, sometimes successfully and sometimes unsuccessfully, but she refuses to stop showing up for her life. She hopes that she can give us the inspiration to begin to embrace our lives again, finding light where we may only be seeing darkness, as well as tips on how to do that using knowledge of the cortisol effect on our lives. So, Karen, welcome, and we thank you. And with that, I will turn the podium over to you.
Thank you so much, Terry. Good evening, everybody. It's 5 o'clock here in Portland, and all of you are all the way across the state, so we're entering into the evening. And I just want to thank you for asking me to do this, and I'm hoping to share some things that can be helpful. So let me that introduction really covers it. I have, like I said, three sons. And we talked a little bit before this meeting started, being that I work in the addiction field and have worked in the addiction field since 1985. I'll be 71 here and not too very long. And in spite of that, I was not able to change my son. All of them, not one of them. And it wasn't for lack of trying. Let me just say that. So the easiest way that I know why I do what I do, like coming and talking with other moms, is not because of what I do for a career. It's because of the agony that I suffered trying to fix my kids and trying to make them stop and trying to intervene and trying to keep them alive. That is why I come and do this. I would say it's been about 10 years ago. So I had already been in the field for at least 25 years. My middle son, Joe, who I don't know if you're supposed to have favorites, but he's my favorite. I tell all my boys they're my favorite, but I know, geez, I hope they never listen to this. He is my favorite. And the reason for that is because even when he was high, he was kind to me. Not so with my other boys. I have one that's an addict and still using, and he's also bipolar, and he gets very angry and verbally abusive and threatening. And he's a big kid, he's 6 foot. My oldest son, I'm also a recovering heroin addict myself. My oldest son was born addicted to heroin, became a heroin addict, and he's been clean almost 10 years now. And I was a horrible mother, as you can imagine. He was 12 when I got clean. And then my middle son, Joe, so I had David, and then got into recovery, and I had my two younger sons, and I was going to do it different. And all I did was indulge them and solve every problem they could ever dream of having. And what I ended up with was kids who did not know how to take care of themselves, or how to deal with disappointment, or how to make a living, or how to wash their clothes, or how to take care of themselves, because I solved every problem before they could even ask for help. So about 10 years ago, Joe also is a heroin addict. He's coming up on 2 years in recovery now. I'm so very grateful. Joe was the one, as Terry had said in the beginning, I buried a daughter in 1980. And that, from that day on, my fear was that I would ever have to bury another child. And she was only 4, so it was, although it was very tragic, she was murdered. So it was a very traumatic death. What happened, let's see, I'm a little staticky. I'm not sure what to do about that. Tell me if it gets any better, okay? Let me see here. Okay. So what ended up happening was Joe was MIA for almost 9 years. He was using heroin. He was constantly out there. He OD'd, from what I heard, many times. He detoxed in jails. He did drugs for a living. That's how he lived his life. And I would lay in my bed at night, and I would think about him being cold. I would think about him being alone. I would think about him being high. I would think about him being hurt. I would think about him overdosing, nobody finding him. I mean, as soon as I laid down at night, these stories would start in my head. And during the day, I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do my job the way I wanted to. I could not live my life and love the people who were in it, because I was so focused on who wasn't. And that is when I got so seriously depressed that I thought, I have to find a way to live. And if I don't, this is going to dominate me. And that began going and looking and reading. And we were talking before, lack of knowledge is not our problem. We know probably more as mothers about addiction than anyone ever will. We have studied it, we have looked at it, we have lived with it, we have ran with it, we've done everything with it. So lack of knowledge is not our problem. We are brilliant. We have oftentimes navigated staying alive, working, and being obsessed, all in the same day and in agony. So when this happened, I started asking some questions of people that I care about and that I know care about me. And I asked them, what do you do when you have this kind of grief? Because I had this belief that I was going to bury my son, another kid. And I even had thoughts like, it would be easier if it would just be over, if it would just happen, instead of waiting for it day after day after day after day. Was killing me. I would hunt for him. I'd call his PO. I tried to break up parties. I hired private investigators. I was obsessed with him. And this friend of mine said to me that she went through a very serious time of grief, because that's what that is. We have lost the child we had hoped to have, and it's grief. And there was nothing I could do about it. The only person I have any power over is me. I cannot change what anybody else thinks, feels, or how they behave. And I spent a good 60 years of my life trying to make him think, feel, and behave different. And what I learned is I had to get focused back on what was happening for me, what went on in my body and my brain and my emotions when I would have a trigger. And so there's two things I did. I'm going to show you a PowerPoint which will teach you what a family trigger is and what you can do about it. And is it easy? No. It's like turning a ship on a dime when you try to change these things. because everything inside of you is wired to react in a certain way, with worry, with fear, with despair, with control, with anger, with fear. That's how we're wired, because we've been over and over and over, we have been exposed to very scary stuff. So this person, so the first thing I started doing, they said one of the things that they did, because it's grief, it's loss. When other kids are going to college and having families, I'm worried whether mine's going to be alive tomorrow morning. And so it's grief. It's grief about what isn't happening that should have. It's a grief about what shouldn't happen that is happening. And so every morning for almost a year, what I started doing was getting up and let's see. So I started crying every morning, and I'd get in the shower and I would think about Joe as a young child. I would think about him as a baby. I would think about him as a young person. I'm going to change my mic. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we could hear you.
Okay, so that's working.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay,
yes, that's a lot better. That's a lot better.
Okay, let's do that. So what happened was I started getting in the shower every morning. I would think about Joe until I cried. Didn't take long, because I spent most of my days on the verge of tears, but not actually crying. And so I would cry, and then I would stand there and I would ask the universe to surround him and put people in front of him and behind him that could care for him. Little did I know it was going to be the Clackamas County Sheriff, but that works too. And I did that almost every morning for a solid year, because I had so much grief that was unexpressed. And I just imagine many of you do as well, because we quit feeling the grief and the anger. And what I noticed after I did that, like I said, almost every morning for a year, what I noticed is that I could go on with my day. What I came to learn when I went into this program to do the intern program for rewiring, what I came to learn was as I was discharging the energy associated with the grief. And so this is what happens for us when we're triggered, when something outside of us, how our brain works, we have our frontal lobe and we have our limbic system. Limbic system holds in memory all of every experience you've ever had in your life, every experience. And this is how PTSD works. And we have PTSD because we've been exposed repeatedly to traumatic events. And so a very clear example of that is when the phone rings and it's your kid. That and the feeling that you get in your body is a release of hormones from limbic system. In a nanosecond, it takes a look at what's been happening and what it can do about it, and if it's ever happened before, and if it's a threat. And it excretes the very same hormones as the first time you felt afraid for your kid. And it can actually go back years. So let's take a look at this. So what is a family trigger, and what is it, what do we do about it? And so how this happens is we hear, see, or think something that activates, oh my goodness, I can't believe this, survival part of the brain. It shuts down and stops functioning. We can activate we activate ourselves by using the 4 W's: wishing, worrying, wondering, and waiting, or by our own thinking. I'm so sorry about the dogs. There's nothing I can do about it though. We can create images of our adult children or partner in danger. So what that's telling me is I can actually trigger myself. If you want to stop the recording for a minute, I can go see if I can quiet these guys down. Or would you want me to just on.
If you want to, we can,
It's
I
okay.
can always cut it out. So if
All
you
right.
need to do something, go ahead.
No, I don't need to. I'm used to them, but all right. So this is very important that we can trigger ourselves with our own thinking, because limbic system does not know if something is real or if it is imagined. That's why hypnotism works, because it doesn't realize if you tell yourself a scary story over and over and over again, you will lock that into your brain. I'm sorry, I'm going to mute myself and go tell them to stop. I'm so very sorry. So, all right, let's go back here for a minute. So when we imagine in our own thinking that something has happened to our child, this is why at night you get flooded with stress hormones, because you're thinking about it. We don't even know what's really happened, and we're already scaring ourselves. So when we do one of the three above, hear, see, or think that something that might activate the brain, or by the wishing, worrying, waiting, and wondering, or our own thinking, or we create images or scare ourselves with our own stories, when we do that, we trigger adrenaline, that feeling of fight or flight or freeze. What happens in your body, and notice this, your shoulders go up, you stop taking in deep breaths, your thinking shuts down, the important part of your body that has solutions and creativity and problem solving and impulse control, this part of your brain, the frontal lobe, stops functioning and closes so that you can be reacting to the fight or flight response in your body. So when we begin calming, when we learn how to calm ourselves down, which I'm going to teach you a technique, when we start to calm ourselves down, our limbic system sees that as a threat, because it doesn't know if you can live not stressed out. Because limbic system's only job is to keep your body alive. It does not care if you're happy. It does not care if you're at ease. It does not care if you're content. It doesn't care. It only cares that you're alive. It is the survival part of the brain. So when we begin to practice calming limbic system, our brain is not sure that we can survive that way, and it starts to activate us with our own thinking. So we start having thoughts that activate us. Cortisol is stored in the fat cells, so it remains in the body. It takes a long time to cool down. I remember one situation with my son where it took almost 2 days for my body to get back to normal because I was so terrified. But a normal event can be 45 to 90 minutes to calm this organism down. Obviously, it impacts our immune system terribly. We lose sleep. We have high blood pressure. But even worse is this becomes the new normal, and we walk around highly stressed, and that's what's called the cortisol effect. So what happens in our brain? Your downstairs brain releases stress hormones. That's what feelings are. I always thought feelings were some kind of mystery, and they're not. They are hormonal response in your body. Fear hormones are adrenaline, cortisol, and your heart races, your body prepares your muscles for fight or flight reaction. Fight or flight. Anger hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, your heart races, your face gets red, your ears get hot, your fists clench, your blood rushes to your muscles so that you have the fight or flight or freeze reaction. What happens in limbic system is all reaction. It is not response. And we want to be able to respond to these things that happen with our kids, and we need to respond to in the best way possible. Sad hormones, very low levels of serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine, tears, sighing, low energy, what happens for a lot of women is we get stuck in the sadness of what's happening, the sadness of the grief, and not the anger. And we need to get a little, and that's what finally happened for me. I got angry about the fact that my life was hijacked by how they were doing. And I couldn't do that anymore. I just couldn't do it. So we want less of these fear and anger and stress hormones and more feel-good hormones. So this is what we do. Every change that a person makes begins by noticing what's happening. We have to notice what's going on in our body. Every change begins with noticing. You will not change something you do not believe needs to be changed. I don't care who tells you to do it. Until you start noticing that your life is rushing through your fingertips, you will not do anything about it. And the same with us. We start noticing what is going on in my body. Just like when those dogs were barking, my shoulders went up. My frontal cortex closed. I could feel this rush of anger at them and fear of not doing a good job. Just like that. You know what I did immediately is we drop our shoulders, because brain informs body by the hormones, but you can inform brain with your body. So when you go from shoulders up to down, limbic system says, what's going on? People who are in fight or flight don't sit relaxed. They sit like this, ready to fight or flight. So what happens is we stop. When I'm triggered, do not talk. Think about it. Every time you have a conversation when you're triggered goes bad. I can guarantee it. Drop your shoulders and do the breathing. I'm going to teach you this right now. It's called box breathing. It's very effective. I use it. I bet I use it 50 times a day, because what happens when you're triggered is you stop breathing. You take short little breaths, sometimes hardly breathing at all. So what this is you breathe in through your nose for the count of 4. You hold it for the count of 4. You breathe out through your mouth for the count of 4. So you're doing it in your head. Breathe in for the count of 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. Breathe out 2, 3, 4. And do it 4 times. You will notice as you do that your body, because what happens in your brain is those stress receptor sites start to close. And if you put your hand on your chest, the same thing will happen. It activates oxytocin, which is a feel-good hormone. And you ask yourself, like when I was walking out there, I took a deep breath. I said to myself, okay, Karen, this is out of your control. You'll get these dogs quieted down, and then you'll get on back to business. So this is what I say with my kids. I don't know what is happening. That is almost my pat answer. I do not really know, because unless they tell me, and they don't, I don't know what's happening. I've seen and dealt with many difficult events with my kid before. I can only change. This is a big go-to for me. I can only change how I think, how I feel, and how I behave. And instead of running around like a crazy person, I just had to quiet it down. And then I'm not going to go on with the rest of this. I'm not sure. How do I stop sharing here?
You might have to hover down around the bottom.
There we go. So that's a real crash course in triggers. Anything can trigger us. This 4 by 4 by 4 by 4, it's called box breathing. And our breath, the very first way we discharge emotion, energy in motion, is through our breath. The same thing happens when we talk it out with a friend. And why is that? Because we're breathing and we're releasing energy. Have you ever had something happen and you talk to somebody and you feel a little better? That's why. It's all chemistry. That was the game changer for me when I found out that what was happening in my body, I had some control over. And so long before Joe got into recovery, while he was still out there with lots of stuff to happen to him yet, I was able to start having more of my day belong to me. That is always my goal. It's not perfect. This is a gentle, gradual process that we go through. And so I just want more of my day. And so, and here we are, 5:58. So please, if you have any questions, I'm going to email the whole PowerPoint to Tammy and Susan so they can get it up for you. And I'll send this breathing that you can listen to. I already shared it with Susan. But does anybody have a quick question or comment? I'm sorry, I feel like this was, boy, it went like that.
No, you did great, Karen. And I think if we could try, I think the easiest way to do that is if you have a question, you can type it into the chat box, and then we'll just kind of take those in order. So if you have a question for Karen, go ahead and do that. Boy, I have a lot of work to do, and you gave me such great information. And I tell you what, it's interesting because you mentioned the breathing, and I'm a horrible insomniac, and I have tried everything. And the breathing that I do at night is about what really changed my whole sleep pattern. So I believe in that for sure. So thank you for that. And it definitely brings a lot of things to mind. And we do have a question. Elizabeth, go right ahead.
Thank you, Terry. It's actually not a question. It's more of a comment. This whole, your whole speech and everything, and actually when I saw your picture before you came on screen, I thought she looked so familiar. And then while you were talking and all the stuff you were sharing about your child and all of this breathing stuff and everything, it was like major deja vu, the whole thing for me. And that was just wild. And so I just want to thank you so much for being here. I just did my right shoulder was in so much pain, and I was doing the breathing, and now I can actually move my head to the right.
Right.
And it's incredible how quickly that can work. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your being here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You're very, very welcome. And there's another question. It says, Karen, how do you deal with people that tell you that your life should revolve around your child, not yourself, as a parent's role? My parent role stopped when they were 18. Because once they were of age and could walk out that door, my control was over.
Oh.
And codependency is crazy wild in our country. You know, people crazy wild. So of course we are wired to want to take care of our children. That's the problem. We are wired to fix them, protect them, keep them safe. It's in our DNA. But this is the problem. Once they're of age, we can't stop them. And that is where I fell, because I was trying to control something I had no control over, and it made me furious. And I had to start taking care, you know, in the airports where they put the oxygen mask on you, put it on you first. That's basically it. When you have little children, we are codependent. We're supposed to be. And then when they're 18 to 25, when their brain is still developing, they're going to learn how to be independent. And then we learn how to be interdependent. But most of us go from co to co to co to co. And I don't know about you guys, but my codependency started long before I had my first kid. Long before that, I was taking care of things I had no business taking care of, and I wasn't a sweet taking care of person. If you didn't do what I wanted, I got mad about it. So that's, yeah, because that, you know what, that's just not true. We cannot. I do direct my children if they want help. I listen for a reasonable recovery request. Other than that, I keep my opinions to myself and deal with my own thoughts and feelings around it.
And Karen, Sunny had a question that kind of goes along with that. She says, do you have contact with your addicted children?
I have to, I call it weighing and measuring, because if I am in a crazy triggered state, when Joe was using, they lived in an RV. You know, we all see all these RVs out there. Well, he was in one of them. And I would drive to Salem, Oregon, and I would modulate my emotions the whole way there. But if I'm not on good, solid ground, I don't. I have 2 in recovery and 1 who's still using and bipolar. So I have contact with, I didn't have contact for 6 months until he stopped verbally abusing me. I'm done letting anybody verbally abuse me. I don't even care if they're my kids. I'm done with it. And you know what? He has a relationship with me. He's still using. And when he gets triggered, he hangs up. He says, I'll talk to you later, Mom, because he knows you do that, I'm done. And it was 6 months last year we did no talking. I'm going to actually email Shelley article on the effects of cortisol. And let me think about what some things you could read. I'm going to send this PowerPoint because there's more to it. And let me see what I can get for you guys. I would love to come back and do. There's so much. There's so many tools, and we need them. We need them so desperately.
Michelle, did you have something you wanted to say to Karen? Go right
Yeah,
ahead if you want to unmute.
you said Michelle?
Yes.
Oh, okay, Karen, hi,
Oh,
how are you this evening? I wanted to thank you for first of all, the shoulder comment. I do notice that when I get uptight, my shoulders are up by my ears.
I know we have no net.
Yeah, and I actually get my shoulders hurt from the tension and the stress that I do carry in that area. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Everything that you said tonight really, really matters. And I'm sorry that you have to go through the same journey or have gone through the same journey that all us moms are, but
Yeah.
a speaker such as yourself and so calming and such kind words to all of us, I really, really thank you for being here.
Oh, you're very welcome. You know, we're in a group we never wanted to be a member of. You know, we're with people, we have friends that we never really wanted to be friends with because we have this common denominator. And it is so very important that we be kind and gentle and know that this is a gradual process. It's like turning a ship on a dime, and ships don't turn on dimes. You know, and when we start practicing this, if all we did was practice the breathing, and another trick I use at night is because we're wired to be on guard at night. That's old limbic brain, to be alert, because that's when people used to come in and steal your money and your women and well, they didn't have money, but your women and your food and your children, you know, and kill the men. And so we're wired to be alert at night. So I listen to things. I do not let my brain just go about thinking. Just because I think it, it's not necessarily true. So it's a good thing to question some of your thoughts. I find the mental health component keeps me stuck to a point. What advice, if any, do you have when someone also has, oh boy, I could go on for an hour because like I said, my son's bipolar, rapid cycling bipolar. His dad was bipolar and committed suicide. So yes, there's so much. But you know, I'll tell you a quick story. 3 years ago with Pete, I took him to a psych unit, tried to get him admitted. He was going to harm himself, he said. He was so high when he got in the car. I held my keys and my wallet in my hand in case I had to jump out of the car. And I get him there. They go through the whole admit process. And the last minute, this was the change. This was the turning point for me. He says, I won't go in, and turns and walks out the door. And I look at the woman and I know I look just like, oh my God, help me. And she says to me, we cannot make him. And when I turned to walk out that door, this is the thought that went through my mind. It gives me chills still. Who do I think I am that I'm going to make him be different? And I got in my car and I left him in the parking lot. And that was the beginning of the change. He texted me the next morning. He said, I woke up today because I wanted to. All right. And then it was shortly after that, because he was going to burn my house down, and I was this and I was that. And I didn't talk to him. I blocked him on everything for almost 6 months. It was 3 years ago, this Mother's Day, that I saw him for the first time after 6 months in a public place, because I will not let anybody abuse me anymore. And the phone is a trigger. That's why I turn my phone off at night. I am not the 911 operator. If there's a 911, call 911. Otherwise, you'll be better served with me the next day when I'm wide awake. So,
And I agree with you, Karen. You did mention in your presentation that sometimes we need to focus more on the fight as opposed to the flight.
yes,
Sometimes taking on that angry mode helps. And I think that's what helped me more than anything was I allowed myself to be angry, and kind of helped me get out of that too. So that I definitely agree with you there. And I know that helps. And
right.
Kat also had a question. She said, can you share more on what you would consider reasonable recovery requests?
Yes, that's like, can you help me find a counselor? I want to get into treatment. If they're working, like Joe's been clean. Now, remember, Joe is a drug addict. That's all he ever did. He's 32 now. He had no idea how to do his taxes. He had no idea how to rent a place. He's been in a halfway house for almost 2 years now, but how to open a banking account, that's a reasonable request. Will you teach me how to do something that I don't know how to do? That's a reasonable recovery request. We want to help our kids be the best they can be, but I wait for them to ask. My big problem was they never had to ask. I was thinking ahead what I could do before they ever asked. And I ask them, do you want some feedback on that? Most of the time they don't. You know what? Google can teach you to almost anything. You can learn how to do anything almost by Googling it. So,
That's true.
so
So
listen for,
Margarita, I'm sorry. Margarita has a question and she says, have you ever felt guilty or have you ever felt your heart broken to pieces?
yes, that's where I was with Joe. I'll tell you what. See, I after my husband committed suicide, I ended up marrying several people. One man abused my kids. I had all kinds of guilt. You know, guilt is a big thing, and I had to learn how to forgive myself. You cannot do different until you know different. I know different now, and I do different now. And I got news for you. Everything that happened to them as a child, and believe me, there was plenty, especially with my oldest when I was using. But even with the other two, I made so many major mistakes. And I cannot undo what I did to them. Only they can. And so what happens for me, what I do, I will pay for their therapy. I've paid for every one of the boys' therapy, and I pay for one treatment. I don't pay for 10. I'd go broke. I don't make enough. But I helped Joe when he was ready because I paid for one. I helped him find a court or a county assisted treatment. And I paid for the first 2 months in a recovery house. So that's a reasonable recovery request. Help me get on my feet. Yep, I'll do that. If you're using, I'm done. Hands off, pays off. Not going to happen. And is it hard? Yes, I feel like my guts, like somebody said earlier, like your guts are being ripped out. But I have to tolerate my own discomfort because that's the only discomfort I'm fixing when I try to fix them is mine. I'm not fixing their pain. I'm fixing my pain. And I have to learn how to fix my own pain and not do it by trying to fix them. I have to take care of my pain. And watching my child suffer from addiction is the most painful of all events, but it doesn't give me a blank check to take care of them because it doesn't work. That's the only reason. If it worked, that's what I would be teaching you to do right now. Take care of them. But there's moms on here that have been taking care of their kids and it hasn't done jack, quite frankly, except exhaust you. Yeah, with Pete, the question, so I don't feel a lot of guilt. Do you feel badly at times for not feeling guilty? I don't, yet I still feel really broken in my ability to handle me or them. Yeah, I like I said, I thought it would be easier if they came and told me Joe had overdosed. And I remember with all of Pete's bipolar stuff and his using, I thought it would be, I had this horrible thought that if he killed himself, at least it would be over. You bet I've had those thoughts because I have been beat into a state of reasonableness with their diseases. I can't do anything to change them. That was the hardest thing. And I had to sit down and write down everything that I've tried and what has happened. Has it stopped anything? And they got well. You know, I've been in 12-step meetings for 38 years. I've rarely heard anybody stand up and say, my mom got me clean. Just haven't heard it. What I have heard is I came to the end of myself. The pain of continuing to use got bigger than the pain of stopping. How have you dealt with all the loss in your life, and do you think your addicts were traumatized by these events? You know, how I dealt with the losses in my life, my 50-year-old son absolutely was traumatized when Ruth was murdered, absolutely. And he also had a using mother, so he had tons of trauma. And he's dealing with his trauma now because he's the only one who can. And my other two boys had lots of trauma. And I remember sitting in a treatment center with Joe, and I thought he used because of the men I was with. He used because he was abused. He used because his dad committed suicide. And you know what he said to me? I used, Mom, because I wanted to. And in my years of working, I'll tell you, I have met people that were raised by wonderful people and they use. And I've worked with people who are raised by awful parents and they use. The common denominator, nature or nurture, the common denominator is you can't become an addict if you don't pick up the drug. That's the common denominator that I've come up with. Because you can come from golden and you can come from awful and it doesn't matter. So does my behavior as a parent affect my children? Absolutely. And I can't do different until I know different. And they, unfortunately, and I've had this conversation with them, are the only ones that can do anything about it. And all three of my boys have engaged in heavy duty counseling, thank God.
Kind of answers a bit of Tanya's question. She asked, how do we handle the situation when our addicts that come from a solid foundation, a good life, yet they choose their spouse, the codependency, over their little boy?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. So, yeah, that, like I said, I don't think people really choose a lousy life. You know, I just don't think they do. They're driven by something usually deeper. Unfortunately, a lot of people choose their spouse over their child. Many children. I was raised by two alcoholic parents. So many people are raised. I raised a kid when I was high. I chose men over my kids. Yeah, it's sad. Until I was done doing it, until it was enough for me, there's not much that, how you can handle that is try to show up for the little boy. What we do know is that kids need to attach to the people around them. And if you are a solid, predictable, consistent figure in their life, that will have an impact. Sometimes grandparents are the best. I don't think we know why we're addicts. I really don't. I think that's the $1,000,000 question. Do addicts always know their demons, or are they blind to why they become an addict? I don't. I think when you're using some drugs, especially like heroin, you don't think about anything. You just use the drug. I mean, the drug becomes your everything. So a lot of times with addiction, people don't really start reflecting until they're done using. That's what's so difficult about it, because you're suffering and they're kind of like going along like nothing happened. You know, they're fine because they have their medicine. Remember, they are our drug. So when they go, we go to detox. We start detoxing from the trauma and the drama and all the different things that go on. So think about it, how that is for you when you're how it is for you when you finally come to the end of yourself, is what it is. It says, Nancy says, what was your breaking point when you got clean? It was actually not a very good motive. When my daughter was murdered in 1980, I wanted to murder the person that murdered her. And I knew I would not do that if I was high. And that's a very odd story, I know, but it's what brought me into recovery. I went to meetings because I had to get clean, because when I was using, I never did anything I said I was going to do. And I came in and I began the work in the rooms of an old, crusty old AA meeting. And it was really difficult. But that was 38 years ago. It'll be 39 years in February. And so I was an angry young woman. I was in my 30s. And all I got to say is the universe put the right people in my path for me, and they weren't afraid of my pain. They were not afraid of it at all. And, you know, I got a lot of stories, because I ended up sponsoring the girl that killed my dad. I ended up sponsoring him. He was the only man I ever sponsored. And some really weird, I mean, I've got tons of some really weird stuff. But that was my breaking point. My heart was crushed. And instead of feeling the sadness, I went into rage. And some of us need to stop feeling sad and get angry, because anger will get you to move. I had to quit being angry and get sad.
Well, Karen, you have brought so much information to us today, and you are such an amazing woman. And we cannot tell you thank you enough for what you shared with us here. And we look forward to getting the information so that we can get that out to some more of our members. And I'm sure we're all going to be eager to give that a try. And you definitely cleared up a lot of things for us. So thank you for all of your hard work and
Thank you.
everything that you've done to bring more information to those that need it. And we certainly appreciate your time here with us tonight.
You bet. You bet. Thank you so much.